spring that prey opinion on the cowboy's legs." Then the sun rose slowly over the wide-open plains, casting a warm golden light across the rolling hills. The air was dry and filled with the faint scent of wild grass, and a soft wind whispered through the tall stalks that swayed gently in the morning. The world seemed peaceful and calm, almost as if it had been waiting for something to happen. John, a seasoned cowboy, rode along a narrow dirt trail, his horse moving steadily beneath him. The rhythm of the hooves against the earth was soothing. And for a moment he allowed himself to breathe in the tranquility of the early morning. John had spent most of his life in the wilderness. He knew the plains like the back of his hand, the twists of the trails, the hidden creeks, and even the patches of grass where snakes often hid. Years of experience had taught him to respect the land, to watch closely, and to never underestimate its dangers. Today, however, he felt particularly relaxed. Perhaps it was the warm sunlight, or maybe it was the simple joy of having a morning to himself. Whatever it was, he moved confidently, humming an old tune under his breath. Nearby, not far from the trail, a young woman named Clara was riding through the same plains. She was on her own horse, carrying a small bundle of supplies meant for a ranch a few miles away. Clara had grown up helping on her family's farm, and she knew how to handle horses, pack efficiently, and stay safe in the wild.
She was independent and resourceful, and though the world could be unpredictable, she trusted her instincts and her skills.
Her journey had started at dawn, and as she rode, she admired the soft colors of the sunrise, the way the sky seemed to melt from deep blue to gold. She noticed the rustle of the wind in the grass, the occasional bird taking flight, and even a distant herd of deer grazing quietly. It was beautiful, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply enjoy the calm of the morning. As John and Clara moved through the plains, neither noticed the other at first. The landscape was vast, and the trail twisted and turned around hills and low valleys. John led his horse down a gentle slope, his eyes scanning the ground for any signs of trouble. He spotted a few rocks and small holes that could trip a horse, and he guided his mount carefully. He enjoyed these moments of solitude, the way the land seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, offering freedom but also demanding respect.
Clara, a little further along, approached the same trail. She slowed her horse as she rounded a bend and finally saw John ahead.
He seemed focused, almost unaware of her presence. She called out a friendly greeting, and he turned, squinting against the sunlight. There was a brief moment of surprise, followed by smiles. Both were strangers, yet there was an instant understanding. A shared recognition of life on the plains and the solitude it often demanded. John waved and guided his horse closer to the side of the trail.
"Morning,"
he said in a calm voice, tipping his hat slightly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Clara nodded, returning the gesture. It's perfect, Dusk. Not a cloud in the sky." She adjusted her grip on the reins, letting her horse slow down. "I wasn't expecting to see anyone out here so early." John chuckled softly. "The plains are big, but every now and then paths cross."
"I'm John.
Clara," she replied. "I'm heading to the ranch a few miles east, delivering some supplies."
"Good of you, John," said nodding. "Those ranches can get pretty isolated."
It's nice to have someone looking out for them. They rode side by side for a short distance, exchanging stories about life on the plains. John spoke of the seasons, of storms that could arrive without warning, and of the animals that shared the land. Clara talked about her family, about learning to ride horses as a child, and about her fascination with nature. The conversation was easy and natural, filled with laughter and shared respect for the environment they both knew so well. As they moved further along the trail, the tall grass brushed against the horse's legs, and the sunlight flickered through the leaves of scattered trees. Birds sang in the distance, and the soft clatter of hooves was accompanied by the gentle rustling of the wind. The scene was serene, almost cinematic in its beauty. Yet, beneath the calm, the plains held secrets. Hidden among the rocks and grass were dangers that could appear without warning, reminding anyone who traveled there that nature was both kind and cruel. John paused for a moment, checking his surroundings. He noticed a small creek nearby and guided his horse toward it. Water was always important for both humans and animals, especially in the heat of the day. Clara followed, slowing her own horse as they approached the shallow stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and inviting. The horses drank quietly, and for a few minutes there was silence. Comfortable, peaceful, a brief reprieve from the constant awareness required when traveling through the wild. After a while, John and Clara resumed their ride, moving along the trail with renewed energy. They pointed out interesting landmarks to each other. A cluster of wildflowers, a large oak tree, a rocky outcrop that cast long shadows in the morning light. The camaraderie grew naturally, built on shared experience and mutual respect. For both, the plains were more than just land. They were a way of life, demanding skill, patience, and awareness. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed higher, and the warmth began to intensify. The air shimmered slightly over the dry ground, and the distant hills seemed hazy under the heat. John felt a sense of contentment but remained alert. Experience had taught him that danger could arrive at any moment, often where it was least expected. Clara, too, kept her senses sharp. She noticed the subtle signs of wildlife, a rustle in the grass, a sudden movement of a bird, and understood that even in calm moments, the plains required respect and caution. Their conversation continued, covering everything from favorite trails to the best places to find wild berries to stories of near misses with storms or wild animals. The connection between them grew stronger, built not just on words, but on shared understanding of a life lived close to nature. There was comfort in knowing that another person understood the challenges and beauty of the land, someone who could appreciate both the quiet mornings and the sudden storms that could appear without warning. By midday, the trail began to narrow, leading them into a small valley surrounded by tall grass and scattered rocks. The sunlight filtered through, casting dappled patterns on the ground. The scene was picturesque, yet there was a tension in the air, subtle but real. Both John and Clara felt it instinctively, a reminder that the wilderness, while beautiful, was never entirely safe. The plains could be generous, offering breathtaking views and solitude, but they could also be unforgiving, demanding respect and vigilance from anyone who dared to traverse them. As they reached the heart of the valley, John slowed his horse, glancing carefully at the ground. Clara noticed his attention and followed his gaze. A few snakes slithered quietly among the grass, moving carefully, almost invisible against the earth. John nodded knowingly, whispering a warning to Clara about staying alert. She listened closely, understanding that even the calmest morning could turn dangerous in an instant. For a moment, they both paused, taking in the scene around them. The beauty, the stillness, and the silent threat that nature always held. The wind rustled gently, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and dry grass. Birds called from a distance, and the horses shifted their weight, sensing the tension as well. It was a moment of awareness, a reminder that life on the plains required both appreciation and caution. As they continued along the trail, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Both knew the importance of staying alert, of respecting the land, and of valuing the moments of calm. The morning had been peaceful, filled with conversation, laughter, and shared admiration for the landscape. Yet beneath it all, the plains held secrets, ready to reveal themselves when least expected. This was the calm before the danger, a serene, beautiful morning that would soon give way to a test of courage, quick thinking, and the strength of the human spirit. But for now, John and Clara rode side by side, unaware of what lay ahead, enjoying the sunlight, the wide-open sky, and the quiet companionship that only the plains could provide. The stage was set, the tension subtle but present, and the adventure waiting just beyond the next rise in the trail. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the warmth of midday pressed down on the plains. A soft golden light had turned brighter, reflecting off the rocks and dry grass. John and Clara rode quietly, the gentle rhythm of their horses blending with the whispering wind. For a while it seemed that the calm morning had returned, but the plains had other plans. Hidden among the tall grass, near a cluster of small rocks, lay a danger John had encountered before but never wished to meet again. A rattlesnake, coiled and waiting, sensed vibrations through the ground as the horse's hooves moved closer. John led his horse carefully, eyes scanning the ground. Years of experience taught him the signs. The subtle movement of grass, the slight shadow of a coil, the faint warning rattle that might come at the last second. But the snake was clever. It remained hidden, its body camouflaged perfectly against the brown and green of the earth. Clara, following a few steps behind, noticed nothing unusual. She trusted John's instincts and let him guide the way.
The first bite came suddenly, violently, and without warning.
John stepped down from a small rise, his boot landing near the edge of the snake's coil. In a flash, the snake struck. Deo. John felt a sharp burning pain in his leg, and a hot, deep sting spread almost immediately. He gasped, stumbling slightly in the stirrups. The horse sensed the sudden tension and shifted nervously, but John managed to regain control. "It bit me!" he shouted, his voice a mixture of pain and alarm. His hand went instinctively to his leg, where he felt the venom begin to spread. A chill ran through him despite the heat, and the blood pounded in his ears. Clara saw him stiffen, the panic in his eyes unmistakable. Without hesitation, she spurred her horse forward, coming alongside him. "John, stay calm. I've got you," she said firmly, trying to mask the fear rising in her chest. She knew rattlesnake bites could be deadly if not treated quickly, and the nearest medical help was hours away. Every second mattered, and she had to act fast. John sank to the side of the trail, holding his leg. The pain was sharp and relentless, radiating up his thigh. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried to steady his breathing. "Clara, I think it's serious," he gasped. "The venom, it's spreading fast." Clara scanned the area quickly, looking for anything that could help. She loosened the straps on her horse's saddle to keep it from becoming a hazard and carefully knelt beside him. Her mind raced. She remembered the first aid techniques her father had taught her years ago. Stay calm, keep the bite area lower than the heart, remove tight clothing, and try to slow the spread.
But she also knew that immediate medical help was crucial.
They were alone in the plains, and every minute counted. She began by calming John, her voice steady and firm. "Listen to me, John. We're going to be okay."
I need you to stay calm and keep your leg still. Don't move it unless you absolutely have to.
She looked around, spotting the shallow creek nearby. If they could get him to water, she could clean the area and prevent swelling from worsening. But the venom had already started to spread, and the pain in John's leg was intense. John gritted his teeth and nodded. I'm trying to stay calm." His breathing was ragged, but he trusted Clara. Her presence, steady and confident, gave him a sense of security he hadn't felt in a long time. Clara carefully unbuckled his boot and sock, exposing the bite. The skin around it was swelling quickly, turning red and hot to the touch. And that simple measures could buy them time until proper treatment arrived. She wrapped a cloth around the area above the bite to slow the flow of venom, keeping it snug but not tight enough to cut off circulation. "Hold still, John. This might sting a bit, but it's necessary," Clara said. She worked with precise movements, speaking to him constantly, distracting him from the pain and keeping him focused on staying calm. The sun beat down on them, adding to the discomfort, but neither faltered. The bond between them grew stronger in those moments, a mix of trust, courage, and raw determination. John winced as the initial shock of pain hit him, but he felt slightly better knowing Clara was in control.
Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you, he said, his voice strained.
Clara shook her head, refusing to accept praise now. No time for that. You have to focus on staying alive. We'll talk about everything else later. Her tone left no room for doubt. They had a crisis to survive, and there was no room for fear to take over.
She quickly assessed the snakebite again.
She knew from her father's lessons that venom could spread rapidly through the bloodstream. There was no anti-venom nearby, and the closest town was many miles away. She had to act quickly. She remembered stories her father had told her about desperate situations where people had used their own resources to save lives. She didn't hesitate. Using careful suction techniques, she worked to extract some of the venom, understanding it was a temporary measure but one that could stabilize him enough to survive until professional help arrived. The minutes stretched on endlessly. Every second felt like an hour. John's breathing became shallow at times, and his pulse quickened. Clara's hands shook slightly, but her focus never wavered. She talked to him constantly, reminding him to breathe, to stay calm, and to focus on survival. The world around them, the shining sun, the swaying grass, the distant hills, faded into the background. There was only the fight for life, raw and immediate, unfolding in the quiet, open plains. Pain, fear, and determination mixed together, creating a tension that neither had ever felt so acutely. Yet in that struggle there was also a sense of resilience. Humans, when pushed to the edge, could find strength they didn't know existed. John felt that strength rising inside him, fueled by Clara's unwavering courage. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remain conscious and alert, even as his body protested the venom's assault. Pars. As she worked, Clara kept checking his pulse and his breathing, making sure he remained stable. Sweat ran down both of their faces, mixing with dust and the heat of the sun. The horses shifted nervously, sensing the tension, but Clara and John remained focused. Neither spoke much now. Words were secondary to action. The silence was punctuated by occasional instructions, the sound of shallow breathing, and the soft rustle of grass in the wind. After what felt like an eternity, Clara noticed a subtle change. The swelling appeared to slow, the intensity of the pain slightly lessened, and John's pulse steadied. It was a small victory, but it gave her hope. She had managed to slow the venom's spread just enough to keep him alive until help could arrive. John, exhausted but conscious, looked at her with a mix of gratitude and amazement. You saved me," he said, his voice weak but steady. I can't believe it." "We're not out of danger yet. You need to stay calm and let me help you until we reach someone who can give you proper treatment." Her eyes were firm, full of determination. The bond between them, forged in the heat of crisis, was unbreakable. Together they moved slowly toward the creek, using the water to cool the swelling and rinse the bite area gently. The horses followed, carefully guided by Clara. Each step required patience and caution. One wrong move could make the situation worse. The sun climbed even higher, making the sweat on their skin and the heat of the plains almost unbearable, but neither gave up. They pressed forward, step by step, moment by moment, driven by the shared will to survive. By late morning they had reached a safer spot near the creek. John's leg was stabilized as best as possible, and Clara kept him calm, talking softly and reassuringly. The tension slowly eased, replaced by a cautious optimism. He had survived the initial shock of the bite. And thanks to Clara's quick thinking, he had a chance to live. For the first time since the attack, John allowed himself to breathe more freely.
He looked at Clara, his eyes filled with gratitude and awe.
You're incredible, he said softly. I don't know how to thank you. Clara shook her head again, brushing off the praise. No time for that. Let's focus on getting you proper help. That's the important thing right now. She paused, then smiled faintly. But I won't lie. I'm glad you're still with me. They stayed by the creek for a short while, letting the water cool the area and giving John a chance to rest. The sun shone brightly overhead, the wind continued to whisper through the tall grass, and the plains, indifferent yet beautiful, seemed to hold their breath. Danger had arrived suddenly and violently, but courage, quick thinking, and human connection had answered in kind. The moment marked a turning point. A lesson in survival, a test of character, and a reminder of the unpredictability of life in the wild. John and Clara had faced the threat together, and in doing so, had discovered a strength neither had fully realized before. The plains were calm once more, but the memory of the rattlesnake bite, the sharp pain, and the fight to stay alive would remain with them forever. It was a day of danger, courage, and resilience. And though the threat had passed for now, the lessons learned would shape them in ways neither could yet understand. The sun was high now, blazing down over the plains, casting long shadows across the dry grass. The air shimmered with heat, and the quiet of the morning had been replaced by the tense stillness of survival. John sat by the edge of the creek, his legs swollen and painful from the rattlesnake bite. Each movement sent a fresh wave of sharp pain through him, reminding him how close he had come to disaster. Clara knelt beside him, her face set in determination. She knew that every second counted. The venom could spread further, and without immediate action, the situation could become deadly. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had already done everything she could with the water and cloth, but she knew that might not be enough. Medical help was miles away, and the plains offered no easy escape.
In situations like this, instinct and courage became the only tools. She looked at John, who was sweating and wincing with pain, and felt a surge of resolve.
She would do whatever it took to keep him alive. "John," she said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you have to trust me. I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's the best chance we have. I need you to stay calm and do exactly what I say." John nodded weakly, his face pale and strained. He had learned over the years that panic only made things worse. Clara's calm, focused presence gave him something to hold on to. "I trust you," he whispered, his voice rough with pain. "Do what you need to do." Clara prepared carefully, using the techniques her father had taught her. She understood that venom from a rattlesnake could spread quickly through the bloodstream, and the most important thing was to slow it down and remove as much as possible. She used her hands to keep the area above the bite steady, preventing sudden movements that could push the venom further into his body. The air between them was thick with tension. Every second seemed to stretch into minutes, as Clara worked quickly and precisely. She began the delicate process of suction, knowing it was risky but necessary. Her lips pressed carefully against the bite area, drawing out the venom with steady, controlled effort. John flinched at first, the sensation sharp and uncomfortable, but he quickly realized it was helping. Clara spoke softly, reassuring him, keeping his mind focused on survival rather than pain.
"You're doing great, John," she said.
"Just a little longer." Breathe slowly, in and out, in and out. Her voice was calm, almost melodic, designed to distract him from the fear and discomfort. The process was exhausting for both of them.
Clara's arms shook from the effort, and the sun beat down relentlessly, making her sweat trickle into her eyes. But she refused to stop. Desperately, she had seen the difference quick action could make, and she knew this was the moment that could save John's life. Her mind blocked out everything else, the beauty of the plains, the warmth of the sun, even the fear gnawing at her own stomach. There was only John, the venom, and the urgent need to act. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. John's breathing was shallow but steady, his eyes fixed on Clara with a mixture of pain and trust. He felt the venom's sting lessen slightly as the dangerous poison was removed, and a faint glimmer of hope appeared. Clara, sensing this change, pushed on carefully, ensuring she had extracted as much venom as possible without causing additional harm. The horses, who had been nervously shifting nearby, seemed to understand the seriousness of the moment. They stood quietly, ears flicking occasionally, but neither moved too close to the humans.
Clara used their presence to anchor herself, drawing strength from the calm animals even as her own body ached.
Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually only a few tense minutes, Clara stepped back slightly. Her hands were trembling, but she smiled faintly.
That's enough for now. You're stable.
The venom isn't spreading as fast anymore. John exhaled deeply, relief flooding his features. He looked down at his leg, then back at Clara. You actually did it, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. Clara shook her head gently, wiping sweat from her brow. Don't think about thanks right now.
You need to rest, stay calm, and keep moving slowly.
Help is coming, and we need to get you there safely. The two paused for a moment, catching their breath, listening to the wind rustle through the tall grass. The plains, indifferent and silent, seemed to hold their breath as well. Danger had come suddenly, violently, but human courage and quick thinking had met it head-on. The bond between Clara and John had grown stronger, forged in the heat of crisis and the struggle for survival. Clara helped John to his feet, supporting him carefully. Each step was painful, but they moved slowly toward a slightly safer area near the creek, where the terrain was flatter and easier for the horses to stand. She guided him gently, her hand steady on his arm, whispering instructions to keep him calm and focused. Every movement was deliberate, measured, designed to prevent any sudden shocks that could worsen the injury. As they moved, John began to feel a faint warmth returning to his leg, a sign that the venom's spread had slowed. He looked at Clara with admiration and gratitude. I don't know how you stayed so calm, he said softly. I would have panicked. Clara smiled faintly, though her own heart was still racing. You'd be surprised what you can do when someone's life depends on you, she replied. You just focus, breathe, and act. Fear doesn't help anyone. The journey was slow and careful. The heat of the sun pressed down relentlessly, making every movement tiring, but Clara refused to let it distract her. She had learned long ago that survival in the plains required patience, awareness, and determination. She kept talking to John, guiding his steps, reassuring him, and maintaining a calm presence. Every word was a lifeline, keeping both of them focused on the immediate task, survival. At one point they had to cross a small rocky patch, uneven and treacherous. Clara steadied John, guiding his foot carefully between rocks, preventing him from stumbling. The horses followed cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. The plains, beautiful yet unforgiving, reminded them of their vulnerability. One misstep could undo all the progress they had made. Despite the exhaustion, Clara pressed on. Her hands were sore, her arms trembling, but she refused to give up. Each step brought them closer to safety, each moment of focus a testament to human courage and resilience. John, inspired by her determination, found strength he didn't know he still had. Together they were a team, united by necessity and by trust forged in extreme circumstances. As they neared a small grove of trees that offered some shade and a slightly easier path, Clara paused to reassess. John's leg, though still swollen, was more stable, and the immediate danger of rapid venom spread had lessened. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. They were not out of danger, but they had survived the worst of the threat. John looked around, taking in the scenery with renewed appreciation. I can't believe how lucky I am," he said. "And how brave you are. I don't even know what to say." Brushing off the praise. "You don't have to say anything. You don't have to say anything.
Right now, we need to focus on getting you to proper care. That's the important part."
Bast. Together, they rested briefly under the shade of the trees, letting the horses graze and recovering a little from the intense exertion. The plains, vast and quiet once more, stretched endlessly in every direction, a reminder of both the beauty and danger inherent in such a wild landscape. The sun, now past its highest point, cast a golden glow that softened the harsh edges of the rocky terrain. Clara took a moment to reflect. She had faced fear head-on, acted decisively, and had managed to save a life. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but there was also a profound sense of accomplishment. She knew that moments like this were rare, that courage often came unexpectedly, and that survival depended on quick thinking, calm nerves, and determination. John, leaning against a tree, looked at her with genuine gratitude. I don't know how I can ever repay you," he said quietly. You didn't just save me, you gave me a second chance." Clara smiled softly, feeling the weight of the day settle into something calmer.
"The plains have their way of testing us," she said. "We just do what we can. Today, we survived. That's what matters."
The two sat together for a few moments longer, letting the tension ease, listening to the wind rustle through the grass and feeling the quiet strength of the wild around them. Danger had come and been met with courage. The rattlesnake, hidden and deadly, had struck, but human bravery and quick action had answered in kind. They would continue their journey, moving carefully toward help, but in this moment the immediate crisis had passed. The bond between Clara and John, forged in a heat of fear and urgency, was unbreakable. They had faced the wild together and emerged stronger, more aware of their own strength, and more grateful for life itself. The plains were calm again, the sun high but forgiving, and the wide-open horizon stretched endlessly, a silent witness to courage, survival, and the extraordinary power of human determination. The plains were quiet once again, the tension of the earlier danger fading slowly into the calm of late afternoon. The golden sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rolling hills and dry grass. The wind still whispered gently, rustling through the wild flowers and tall stalks of grass, but the air felt different now, less tense, more forgiving. John sat leaning against a sturdy tree, his face pale but showing the first signs of relief. Rasp. His leg, though swollen and sore from the rattlesnake bite, had stopped throbbing as sharply, and the worst of the venom's immediate threat had passed, thanks to Clara's courage and quick thinking. Clara sat beside him, her hat pulled low to shield her face from the sun, her hands still slightly trembling from the intensity of the morning. Her heart was still pounding, a lingering reminder of the fear and urgency they had faced. Yet, beneath the adrenaline, there was also a deep sense of satisfaction. She had acted decisively, and the result was clear. John was alive. They had survived what could have been a fatal encounter on the plains, and the enormity of that fact settled around them like a quiet, heavy blessing. John shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through his leg, but he forced a smile. "I still can't believe what you did," he said softly. I owe you my life, Clara." "I don't even know where to start to thank you." Clara shook her head, brushing away the praise with a faint smile.
"Don't thank me yet," she said. "We're not out of the woods. We need to get you proper care. That's the most important thing right now."
They waited briefly, allowing the horses to rest and graze on the nearby grass. The animals, sensitive to the earlier danger, stayed close to their riders, watching the surroundings cautiously, but with a quiet steadiness. Clara checked John's pulse and breathing one more time, satisfied that his condition had stabilized enough to move carefully.
They couldn't stay by the creek forever, and she knew that getting him to a place with medical help was critical.
Carefully, they began the slow trek back toward the main trail. John leaned heavily on Clara for support, each step deliberate and measured. His horse walked slowly beside them, grazing lightly and moving carefully over uneven patches of earth. The journey was painstakingly slow, but both were focused on safety. Every movement was controlled, every decision deliberate. They were no longer acting out of panic, but with cautious purpose, determined to reach help. As they walked, the weight of the morning's events settled into their minds. The plains, beautiful yet unforgiving, had tested them both. John felt a new respect for the young woman beside him. She had acted without hesitation, without fear clouding her judgment, and her courage had made all the difference. "Births, Clara," he said quietly, his voice reflective. "I've spent my whole life on these plains. I thought I knew everything about surviving out here.
"But what you did today, I've never seen anything like it."
"You're remarkable." Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes remained alert to the surroundings.
"We all have moments like this," she said. "Sometimes the situation calls for it.
You just have to act. That's all there is to it."
She paused, glancing at the horizon. "The plains don't wait for anyone. Danger can appear without warning. You survive by being ready and by helping each other when the moment comes." John nodded, understanding deeply now the truth of her words. He had faced many challenges in his life: storms, wild animals, and accidents, but the venom, sudden and unpredictable, had reminded him that nature could always surprise even the most experienced, and it had also reminded him of something equally important. Courage and quick thinking could make the difference between life and death. They continued along the trail, moving slowly but steadily. Each step brought John closer to safety, and Clara's presence made him feel stronger than he had thought possible in his weakened state. They passed familiar landmarks, now seen in a different light. Rocks that once seemed ordinary now reminded John of the fragility of life. Trees that had offered shade and beauty in the morning now stood as silent witnesses to the morning struggle. And the creek, where the venom had been slowed and survival had begun, shimmered in the sunlight, as if celebrating their triumph. By the time the sun began its descent, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they had reached the edge of the plains where another rancher had spotted them in the distance. The relief that washed over both John and Clara was immense. Help had arrived. The rancher, experienced and calm, quickly assessed John's condition and prepared to transport him to proper medical care. The horses were guided carefully, and Clara assisted, making sure John's leg remained stable.
As they moved him to the wagon, John looked at Clara with a mix of gratitude, admiration, and awe.
I don't even know what to say," he murmured. "Today, you saved me. You risked yourself for me. I'll never forget this." Clara smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
You don't have to say anything, she replied. The important thing is that you're alive.
That's enough. The journey to proper medical care was quiet. John rested, supported by the wagon and the steady hands of the rancher, while Clara rode beside them. The plain stretched endlessly, calm and golden in the late afternoon light. Every mile they traveled reinforced the relief that the worst was behind them. The fear, the pain, and the tension of the morning had given way to hope, gratitude, and a deep sense of connection. When they finally arrived at the small medical station in the nearby town, John was attended to quickly. The swelling in his leg was treated and the wound cleaned carefully. Clara watched closely, making sure he received proper care, feeling a quiet satisfaction as she saw him stabilized and resting comfortably. The medical team praised her quick thinking, noting how her actions had bought precious time and likely saved his life. As science. She blushed slightly, unaccustomed to attention, but her pride was quiet and grounded. Brows. She knew she had done what needed to be done, and that was enough. Once John was settled, he took a deep breath, looking at Clara with sincere gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you," he said again, his voice strong despite the exhaustion. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me what courage looks like. I'll never forget this day. Clara smiled faintly. The plains teach you many lessons, she said softly. Some of them are about survival, some about respect for nature, and some about human courage and connection. Today you learned all three. John nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The events of the morning, the pain, the fear, and the life-threatening danger had changed something in him. He had survived because of his own resilience and because of Clara's bravery. He had learned to respect not just the plains, but also the strength that people could summon when faced with impossible circumstances. Over the next few days, John's recovery continued. The swelling in his leg went down, the pain gradually lessened, and his energy began to return. Clara stayed nearby, helping him as he regained strength. They talked about the morning's events, about the wild unpredictability of the plains, and about the importance of courage, quick thinking, and trust. Their friendship deepened, forged in the heat of danger and tempered by shared experience. John reflected often on the lessons he had learned. He realized that life on the plains was as much about connection as it was about skill. The bond he had formed with Clara, built in moments of fear, resilience, and mutual trust, was now unbreakable. He felt gratitude not only for her actions, but also for the reminder that even in the harshest conditions, human courage and kindness could prevail. Clara, too, reflected on the events of that day. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had faced a moment where hesitation could have been fatal. Yet she had chosen action. The experience had strengthened her confidence and deepened her appreciation for life. She had saved a life, yes, but she had also witnessed the profound connection that could emerge in extreme circumstances. As the sun set over the plains, casting the landscape in deep oranges and purples, John and Clara stood together outside the medical station, looking out at the wide-open horizon. The world felt larger, more vivid, and more precious. They had faced danger, survived, and grown stronger in ways that words could barely capture. The plains, ever beautiful and indifferent, stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of both the fragility and resilience of life. John turned to Clara, his eyes full of gratitude and warmth.
I don't know what the future holds, he said, but I do know this. I'll never forget today, and I'll never forget you.
You saved my life, and I'll carry that with me forever. Clara smiled, a soft, serene expression that reflected both relief and quiet pride.
We survived together, she said. That's what matters.
And maybe the plains taught us both something about courage, trust, and resilience. That's a lesson worth keeping. They stood there for a while longer, the wind whispering around them, the colors of the sunset painting the sky, and the vast plains stretching endlessly in every direction.
Danger had come and passed.
Pain and fear had been faced and overcome. Life, fragile yet enduring, continued, stronger for the courage and determination of those who refused to give up. For John and Clara, the day had begun with calm, had plunged into terror, and had ended with hope, recovery, and reflection. They had faced the wild together, survived the unimaginable, and emerged with a bond that would last a lifetime. The plains remained as wild and beautiful as ever, but for them, it would always be a place of courage, resilience, and human connection.